Good evening. I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019. The Portland Board of Public Education is meeting in Casco Bay High School. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Mr. Atkinson,
Here.
Mr. Balfont,
Here.
Ms. Bondo,
Présente.
Ms. Figdor,
Here.
Ms. Davis,
Here.
Ms. Morioni,
Here.
Ms. Thompson,
Here.
Ms. Trevorrow, Mr. Inabanza,
Here.
Mr. Norris,
Here.
Ms. Power-Rakowski, Mr. Samuntu,
Présent.
and Mr. Abdirahman, and Chair Rodriguez.
Presente. And Ms. Trevorrow did let me know that she was not going to be here, and Ms. Anna Powers-Rakowski said she'll be running a little bit late, so I'm sure she'll join us shortly. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. For the report of the chair, just wanted to point out, yesterday the school board presented our FY20 budget to the city council. Our next meeting with them would be tomorrow, Wednesday night. It's a joint meeting between our finances committees, and that'll begin that stage of the budget process, which again will culminate on a June 11th referendum for Portland voters to decide on whether or not they will adopt the school board approved budget. I did not have anything else that I wanted to add as chair comments, but one quick little note before we move along. The NSBA annual conference presentation that we were hoping to accomplish today, we're going to push that out to May 7th. And that's just to make sure that the student reps who came with us and that those of us that attended have a more organized presentation and a way to deliver the information in a way that's going to be easily digested by everybody. Having said that, for the report of the superintendent, Mr. Botana, take it away.
I would prefer that the student go first.
You know what? And as my cheat sheet says, the student should go first. Our agenda says that we're up for a student report for Casco Bay High School. That's actually not accurate. We're up for an adult ed report. So we have Mr. Axel Samantu. Sir, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to present my report for this Tuesday, 23rd. So on January 3rd and March 14, 2019, the director of PAE, Anita C. Orange, and I had a meet with students to discuss how to make PAE a more welcoming place. One thing that was mentioned is that students need Wi-Fi. Also, students tell me that they need an offering of more intensive class for ESL, so that student can accept the program in a short time. This recommendation will support an increase in the number of students achieve the high school diploma or ISET credential each year. And that can give us more space in class and reduce waiting lists. Both of these issues are currently being addressed. Thanks to the Portland Public System IT department, we will have improved Wi-Fi soon. Also, Portland Adult Education is now piloting an intensive language class and is looking for funding to offer more of this class. On Friday, April 12th, I attend the Education Academy graduation. This program is in a partnership between PAE, Teach Portland, and many other partners. The graduation will be able to become educational technician or substitute teacher and can continue toward the goal of becoming teacher in the United States. April 12th was a big day for 11 high-skilled immigrants. It looked the door was open for other fields like accounting, medical field, and more. At Portland Adult Education, we will have a couple of events, like in ESOL Level 3 Basic Computer Skill class. It starts in April 23rd to May 30 on Tuesday and Thursday during the day. He starts at 11:30 till 2:15. And in the evening, he starts at 5:45 to 8:30. We have a CNA courses at St. John who start in June 24th through August 9th. At Poland Adult Education, the April calendar is so busy. The student will be choosing their class for spring semester. April 4th was the last day of class at PAE, and April 22nd, or yesterday, was the first day of spring semester. Poland Adult Education serve a diverse student body, nearly 4,000. I invite all school board members to come at PAE and see what does it mean. Students come from Southeast, the Middle East, East-West, Central and South Africa, and from many Hispanic countries. Students come from around 82 countries, and different cultures are represented by this English language learner. No single language spoken by majority of them, but they speak more than 30 languages. Come and see what's happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simontu. Just another reminder to the folks here and at home watching us that having an adult education rep on the board is something new. Axels is the very first student from adult ed that has sat as a board member. And I think we're all incredibly proud to have student voices represented at this level, and to have that new addition, to have all five of our student reps present is always enlightening and should be considered as important information for us to know what's going on in our building. So thank you again, Mr. Simontu, for your report. And now we're ready for the report of the superintendent. Mr. Botana, take it away.
Okay. I would like to welcome everyone back for the final stretch of the school year. I hope everyone had a restful and restorative April break, and that we're ready to bear down for more excitement and learning through the middle of June. I would like to start tonight by recognizing Lincoln Middle School science teacher Crystal Driscoll, who recently was selected by the Dole Food Company for her dedication to teaching youth about the importance of health and nutrition. As part of Dole's Powering the Hero Within campaign with Captain Marvel, Dole chose 3 national superheroes. You're a superhero. To recognize on International Women's Day on March 8th, which coincided with the release of the Captain Marvel movie. Part of the award was a shipment of bananas, pineapples, and Dole's kids' cookbooks for her classroom. Crystal is clearly a standout teacher. She engages her students in STEM learning through activities such as having a visiting engineer conduct a fun engineering design competition in her classroom, and by taking students to Augusta for a Maine DEP hearing regarding greenhouse gas emissions. Among her other accomplishments were that she was part of a team of 3 Lincoln teachers who were finalists in the inaugural 2016 STEM Education Innovation Challenge Grant Competition, and that team won a $2,000 grant to implement their innovative wind-powered kinetic sculpture proposal in the classroom. So congratulations to the superhero teacher. Do you want to tell us your superpower?
I don't sleep. I just want to say thank you for your time tonight, so I appreciate it. And the shipment of bananas and pineapples was 2 pineapples and 3 bunches of bananas, but it's enough so that the students I have this quarter, they'll be making some smoothies with it, so we'll talk about where they came from. But awesome. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Continuing with the recognition of award winners, I would like to congratulate the winners of the first ever collaborative Fund for Teachers grants, co-sponsored by Fund for Teachers and the Foundation for Portland Public Schools. Julie Shepard, Jane Armstrong, and Holly Backus, also from Lincoln School, and Kristen Fox were selected by the review panel. Funds for Teacher funds projects that allow teachers to propose learning experiences that allow them to learn firsthand about a topic related to their work context through international travel. Participants bring back their experiences and integrate them into a unit over the course of the following school year. PPS teachers have previously applied and have received Fund for Teacher grants, but this is a new process where Fund for Teachers and the Foundation for Portland Public Schools pooled resources and guaranteed grants to any applicant who met the fund's rigorous criteria. Congratulations to our recipients, and I look forward to having them at a board meeting next year to talk about their experiences. On Friday, as you heard from Mr. Samuntu, actually this was like a Friday, not last Friday, but Friday before that, I was happy to attend the first graduation of the new Mainers Resource Center Education Academy's inaugural class. The Education Academy is a collaboration between Portland Adult Education, our Portland Public Schools Human Resource Department, and the State of Maine's Labor Department. The 11 graduates hailing from all over the world are among the highly trained immigrants living in our community who are looking to contribute in meaningful ways to our educational system and our economy. They participated in the program to help them understand the American educational system and achieve EdTech certification. They each served an internship in our schools, and they're now prepared and empowered to look for those positions, hopefully in our district in the coming months. One of our priorities as a school system is to recruit, support, and retain the most diverse and talented workforce in the state. As many of you know, the Portland Public Schools student population is the most diverse in the state, and while our staff is probably more diverse than most other districts in Maine, we're nowhere as diverse as we want to be. I would like to thank all of the Portland Adult Education staff led by Anita St. Ange for their leadership on this issue. I would like to thank Sally Sutton in particular for her energy and passion in getting the Education Academy off the ground. And finally, I would like to thank Barb Stoddard for her leadership on Teach Portland for the past 3 years. This is the next step in that effort, and I couldn't be prouder of this important achievement. April 7th through the 13th was National Volunteer Week. This recognition week is one of the opportunities to celebrate the impact of volunteer service and the power of volunteers to make a difference, to build stronger communities, and be a force that transforms the world. We want to take this opportunity to honor and acknowledge the contributions our volunteers make to support Portland Public Schools, staff, students, and their families. The Portland Public Schools community benefits from the invaluable resource provided by our volunteers who are essential to the fabric of our schools. There is no job too big or too small for our volunteers. They may read one-on-one with kids, coach basketball, mentor students, chaperone at school dance or a field trip, assist in our walking school bus, plant a garden, tutor students for the SAT, laminate teaching materials, raise money for PTAs, collect gate receipts at sporting events, and or inspire students to reach for their dreams. The PPS volunteer pool, and this is incredibly impressive, is comprised of about 2,500 adults. They contribute an average of 7,422 hours a month. According to the independent sector, a coalition of charities, foundations, corporations, and individuals that provide statistical information on the estimated dollar value of volunteer time, the national value of each volunteer hour is $25.43. For Maine, the value is $23.12 an hour, which for PPS translates to a monthly average contribution of $171,597, or for a school year total of $1.7 million. While we acknowledge the monetary value of our volunteers' contributions, it's also important to recognize the intrinsic and immeasurable value of their service. Whether they are parents supporting their children and schools, community experts, retired mentors, or any other type of volunteer, the Portland Public Schools would not be able to do everything that we do for our students without the contributions of those volunteers. They teach so many lessons. None is more important than the lesson of community engagement and responsibility that they demonstrate for our students every day. As a district, we strive to develop our students' sense of civic pride. Our whole student goal says, quote, all PPS students will develop the skills, habits, and mindsets they need to engage in and contribute to our diverse city and ever-changing world. Our volunteers are outstanding exemplars of this goal that our students see every day, that our students see in their everyday life. Thank you to our great volunteers. Finally, a couple of housekeeping items. The board's retreat is scheduled for next Tuesday, and that it was scheduled for next Tuesday, and it's being rescheduled so that we continue the good work that we started in the March retreat. And also, the May 7th board meeting, originally advertised at Peaks Island School, is being changed to a regular meeting at Portland City Hall to accommodate staff needs. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Excuse me. For the report of the Secretary, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of April 2nd, 2019. Is there a motion? Ms. Figdor, second by Mr. Atkinson. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? None? Any board discussion? Oh, wow. Great. Excuse me. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of April 2nd, 2019, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in favor.
I abstained because I was not present.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. So,
Yes,
and
I
Ms.
abstained
Davis
because I was
abstained.
not present at that meeting.
All right, next up, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of April 8th, 2019. Is there a motion? Ms. Davis, second. Ms. Figdor, any questions on the motion? Ms. Davis?
There are two corrections. Ms. Thompson's name is misspelled, and there is a typo with two P's in the word prove. So I think it needs to have just a little editing.
Oh, I think I read the motion. Oh, I thought you were taking the notes. Where's misspelled?
You got it.
Thank you. So we'll take those as friendly amendments. Any other questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? I would just say that I usually look out for my name to be misspelled, so I appreciate someone's looking out for Sarah.
Sarah usually catches it,
I know.
Sarah usually catches her own name, but
Thank
I
you.
happened to see this one, and I saw the P's too.
All those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of April 8th, 2019, please indicate. That one's unanimous with the students voting in favor as well. Thank you. Report of the committees. All right, curriculum and ed planning. Mr. Balfans?
So we had the curriculum committee meeting earlier this month. We reviewed the high school diploma requirements. Staff is looking into one aspect of the requirements, in particular the connection between demonstrating units of proficiency and the types of educational experiences listed on page 4 of the policy. We also did a cursory review of the AP policy. There were a series of 5 questions that the staff identified and wanted to evaluate before working on the policy. And then that is all.
Thank you, Mr. Balfans. Operations Committee, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have not sent an email out to the other members, Ms. Davis and Ms. Figdor, but the superintendent and I met to review when we could have the next meeting, and our meetings have been scheduled for the first Thursday of every month, and so that is May 2nd at 6 p.m., and we'll be meeting at central office, so that falls into our typical schedule, but we hadn't put something out yet. And under other member concerns, I will talk about DABC, BLEAC. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance and Personnel. Ms. Trevor is not here, but I think Mr. Balfans is going to pick it up. Thanks.
So the chair of the school board presented our budget to the city council last night. Tomorrow, the city finance committee will review the budget and possibly recommend the budget to the full city council. People are encouraged to attend, and we'll have staff and committee members there to answer any questions that the city finance committee may have. Additionally, the school board's finance committee will have its next meeting at central office on May 9th at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Balfans. Policy and Legislative Committee, Ms. Davis.
The legislative part of our committee has been continuing its regular procedure with usually me and the superintendent and sometimes other committee members in attendance meeting with the city's legislative committee every Monday morning, where we review new bills that are printed and the progress of various bills through the legislative process. At this point, the number of new bills being printed is slowing down, but it's not done yet. There are a number of bills that are known to be in the revisor's office but have not actually yet been printed, including some fairly substantive ones. I'm not sure if they apply to schools, but we will be seeing more bills. But definitely what is speeding up is there's more action being taken on bills, there's more testimony, there are more hearings and work sessions. And that at this point, bills on similar topics are beginning to be combined, revised, and worked on in order to try and find a single bill that essentially will garner the most support if that's a bill that the committee actually wants to move forward. One of the bills that we spent time talking about was the local option sales tax, as that one there's some compromise language out there, some of which the committee found good, and some which there were some issues, certainly from the city side, in terms of losing some local control. That is pretty much a bright line. As for us, we're generally trying to not increase the cost of general education and to preserve the funding formula to Portland Public Schools' advantage. The city also is generally asking that the state, to keep a pretty bright line about what the state is in control of and what the city is in control of. And there are many bills where that can become a negotiating point. So that said, that will continue. We'll be continuing to meet. I think that working with the city's staff and the city's committee has been very instructive in understanding some of the issues facing our colleagues on the city council, both financial and legislative, and I think for them to understand our issues as well and our concerns. Our next Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee meeting will be May 14th at 7 p.m. at Central Office, and that is it's dealing more with the policy side of things, and we'll certainly continue to update folks around the legislative. You are receiving a copy of the reports that we're getting as well. It's not possible to talk about every single bill with the entire board. Things are just moving too quickly at this point. So that is, and tonight we have on our agenda the social media policy for further discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I wanted to just point out also, and I think I've told you, if not, this is my opportunity to say it again, the legislative piece of that committee's work is obviously taking a lot of your time. They're meeting weekly, and you've been there for all those meetings. I really do appreciate the extra amount of time that you're dedicating to that, and that we are having a seat at that table, because it clearly is important for us to be able to advocate from our point of view. I know the superintendent is always there, but to have a board member there is super important, so I appreciate that. I know Ms. Figdor has been there for a handful of those meetings as well, if not most of them. So again, thank you. Public Affairs Committee, Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair. First things first, we have a Public Affairs event tomorrow morning, Coffee with Constituents over at Coffee by Design on Diamond Street, so the Bayside location. And we also met this month. The big topic of conversation was around the Portland Promise, and specifically how we can more effectively communicate the Portland Promise, the goals and strategies, and what the strategic plan is to parents and to the wider community. And that was something that was brought to us by several parents who felt that, they had sort of bought into the promise and understood it, but that they didn't feel that was shared as much as they would have liked within the school community. And so we're going to be digging into that some more in our next meeting on May 14th at 5:30 at Central Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Appointments Committee, Ms. Morioni.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to first apologize to the full board. We have been delayed. Drummond and Woodsum, the lawyers, have our policies that are reviewing those, and I did not get a chance and wanted to today to follow up with Janet to see where they are in the process, to see if we could get expedited, because this has been something that we've been working on, waiting for their review. So just to let you know what those policies are, the Appointments Committee worked quite a few meetings ago, but it was a new policy entitled Advisory Panels or Committees to the Board of Public Education. And it's a policy, as we discussed, and was referred to the Appointments Committee to work on to how we are appointing people to our panels and committees. So there's a policy that's being, that's a draft, this is Drummond and Woodsum, and then there's also it's BCF-R, which is regulations of panels or advisory committees to the Board of Public Education. So a lot of work went into those. Just wanted to advise the board, please stay tuned. These should be to the board soon for review. We do not have any Appointments Committee meetings scheduled in the near future, but we will, hopefully this will be coming shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morioni. And excuse me, other committee and or member concerns, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The District Advisory Board Committee, known as I guess the agenda, too, we have to fix on our agenda with Harriman. Thank you for that. So District Advisory Building Committee, DABC, and the Building Level Advisory Committee, which is the BLAC. We will be meeting this Thursday, March 25th at 6 o'clock at Lyseth Elementary School. I encourage people to attend if they can. We're going to be talking about the bids that came in, and the bids versus the estimate and options potentially going forward. We'll also be talking about Buildings for Our Future, next steps, as well as reviewing the LEAD summary, which is the efficiency summary that has been put together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Any other member concerns? Ms. Morioni.
I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Valenzuela and her team. Put together the most recent Parent University topic. And I was just, unfortunately, I had remarks written up about that, and now I can't find them. But maybe if Ms. Valenzuela wouldn't mind, would you mind, Grace, coming to speak about our event that we had from Parent University? We had 4 panelists at that event. We had approximately between 40 and 50 parents at Parent University, but I didn't want to be remiss and not speak about it, but I can't find my notes that I had typed up this afternoon. So am I putting you on the spot? If I can keep looking. But it was well attended, and what I needed to remember was the actual topic of it, but it was around healthy sexuality and teaching your child healthy, starting the conversation around healthy sexuality. The reason why I wanted to make sure I brought it up was also because the parents in the audience, it was very engaging and a really good discourse with our the panelists that we did have there, the experts in the community. And from that, it was very clear that they wanted more. They wanted more around this topic, and they want to continue this dialogue, as well as they wanted to know more around what's going on within our schools in this topic. But I'll find my notes, and I'll get it out to the board members. And there was and also maybe we can get a recap on our Portland Public Schools website would be helpful, I think, to the community. But thank you.
Actually, the video. Thank you, Ms. Morioni.
I just want to say that there are resources that we posted on the Parent University website about this workshop because of the interests of the parents. So all of the information, including the questions that were asked by the parents and the answers that were given by the experts, are all posted on the website.
And is the video also?
We did not videotape it
videotape
because of the sensitivity of the topic.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. Thank you, Ms. Morioni. Consent items. Will the superintendent please speak on this item?
Yes, under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district. As required by that policy, all the donations are listed in the board memo accompanying this item, and as has been the practice, each donor will receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value, and historical or commemorative significance. The contributors are for Longfellow Elementary School. They received a donation to be used towards Longfellow's STEM projects from B. Peachtree Inc. of Biddeford. Casco Bay High School received a donation to be used toward their Junior Journey class trip from the Friends of Katahdin Woods and Waters of Portland. Casco Bay received an additional donation to be used toward purchasing supplies and other needs for their Junior Journey class trip from Sun Life Financial of Scarborough, and Rowe Elementary School received a Hannaford Helps donation from Hannaford of Scarborough. So we're very grateful to all of our generous contributors for the support of our schools.
Thank you, Superintendent. We don't have any items for the board focus on educational issues tonight. So next we will move on to our old business. Excuse me. Consideration and action to approve policy GBEEA, use of social media by school staff. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, second by Ms. Davis. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
Yes, today you're being asked to approve the staff use of social media policy. During the spring of 2018, the policy committee began the process of reviewing social media policies. During the fall of 2018, different policy drafts were developed, shared with stakeholders, including the board's policy committee, principals, leadership of the Portland Education Association, and attorneys at Drummond Woodsum. At the policy committee's February meeting, the committee approved a final version for review by Drummond Woodsum attorneys, and the version before the board incorporates minor edits that were made to the policy committee's approved version. The proposed policy incorporates Drummond Woodsum sample policies, but is largely built around the policy currently in use in RSU 21 and a policy from Jackson, Michigan. The proposed policy, 1, defines social media and distinguishes between social media for educational and personal uses. 2, it outlines the parameters for approval of social media for educational uses. 3, it delineates the manner in which school staff can and cannot use social media to communicate with district students. And 4, it delineates the appropriate uses of text messaging for communicating with students. And finally, it outlines administrator responsibilities for monitoring and training on the policy. The board reviewed this policy in a first read and workshop at our last meeting, and at that time, board members raised some issues for consideration by staff and the policy committee. Your packet includes a memo that summarizes the feedback received and staff responses to those comments. The policy committee reviewed and concurred with staff recommendations on April 9th. I'm grateful to members of the policy committee, to Sue Olafson, representing the Portland Education Association, for her review and engagement, as well as for our middle school and high school principals, and adult ed director, I might add. This is an important and evolving issue in our times. I believe it's important to establish a set of parameters around social media use, but also recognize that as technology and practice evolves, we will likely need to revisit this policy frequently. And so with that, I would like to ask you to approve it.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? Mr. Balfans?
more procedural. At what point? Because I do intend to move to amend the motion. I'm just wondering at what point should I do
So
that?
I think amendments, usually we want to consider them at the board discussion level. If we have questions right now, is to clarify what's currently being proposed, but maybe there's a question that can maybe prompt us to your amendments in regards to the policy. So if you want to wait to the discussion, that'd be fine as well. So are there any board questions on the motion? Ms. Mariani?
Over the last couple of days, we received some emails from our employees regarding some of them that use other apps or technology to communicate with students and or staff around setting up, particularly like at Portland High School with regards to setting up job shadowing or internships, those types of things. That was one example. Then another one by Mr. Cronin, who works with Make It Happen and trying to communicate with students around that. So I'm based on those folks that just seem to be, I wouldn't necessarily, they're not direct teacher to student per se, but they're staff that need access to students sometimes even after hours. And or I guess my question is, how strictly in our policy or where in our policy could we potentially look at making some flexibility, if at all possible, with regards to those types of situations? Because I am concerned about those issues.
So
I don't know if I'm making, I just wonder, within the policy, if there's anywhere that is making it so strict that they feel as if they don't have any flexibility with what they need to do in communicating.
So I think that what you received today was in response to Mr. Balfont's had suggested that he wanted to make some amendments to the policy as it's currently written. I guess I
was just trying to do what our chair just suggested would make a discussion question that could then lead into an edit by a board member. But just curious as if maybe even Mr. Balfont's could identify now where in the policy we could make some possible adjustments. I don't know.
Yeah,
but we can just leave it out there. It's okay. Nobody needs to necessarily answer it. I'm just wanted to basically raise it as, I guess it's more of a discussion, not really a question, but just wondering is there any part of the policy that could be a bit more flexible?
Thank you. Ms. Davis?
Mine is a question, and I think, and it's a question to some extent. I know some of the answer, although I do not know all of the answer. And in further reflection upon this policy, one of the things that I know that our committee did not discuss is that we are talking about communication between adults and minors. And that, like our photo policy and other kinds of things, policy, similar kinds of communication or there oftentimes is a requirement because our students are, for the most part, minors and therefore not able to give legal consent on their own, that the parents or guardians are required to do that. And the question I have that I don't, and I know the answer to that, I don't believe at any point we really got into a deep discussion about that issue at the committee level. I don't know if at the board workshop that was raised or not because I wasn't here. My question to the superintendent is, to what extent was that a question ever raised by or to Drummond Woodsum in their review? Because I think it's one thing when we're talking about communication between adults, and it's another thing when we're talking about communication between adults and minor children.
It was not explicitly raised to Drummond Woodsum. Drummond Woodsum did review the policy. In fact, the policy, as you know, is based on a policy that they have crafted and is in place in District 21. The issue did come up during the board workshop, in not specifically that way, but around, and I know that Mr. Atkinson and I had a conversation about this, I believe, after or at the last policy committee meeting. So I will say around that issue that I know that that's part of what Mr. Balfons will introduce today as an amendment, and I don't have a significant concern with that, other than in situations which I would ask the board to consider, situations where a staff member, say for example, a social worker is engaged in, conversation via text with a student who may have safety concerns or things along those lines that are grounded in their home situation, and where we would find ourselves in a position of then having to discipline that staff person for, communicating via text, maybe the only way in which they could communicate with that student on an issue that actually involved the parents, and, where parent consent would not have been achieved.
I would just note that the information that we used to discuss this at the committee level did not raise that issue for us. It outlined a number of other issues, but it did not highlight that minor adult issue, because I would have directed I would have had some concerns and some questions about it at the committee
But I will
level,
say
so.
that in the policy committee, that we did discuss the possibility of not allowing texting for all of those reasons. And the committee came out on the side of allowing texting for those reasons.
But for this committee and board member, the context which I had not focused on, as with the clarity that I now focus on, I see it differently when we are talking about adults and minor children whose parents or guardians have the rights and responsibilities that I think might govern this, the same as they do with allowing photographs to be taken or not taken, that this could be viewed as an invasion of privacy. It changes the context and the calculation and the thought process for me. I'm not saying where I sit on it, but it's a piece that was not a robust part of the committee conversation for all committee members, or highlighted as a potential issue that we might encounter at the board, or that may be a potential issue in the community. So,
Ms. Victor and then Ms. Thompson.
I have a question to follow up on Mrs. Davis's point, which is, are we viewing text messaging as different than email, since email is also like text messaging, both on students' computers and on their phones? And if it is different, in what way? Because when I get an email, I'm getting a notification of that email, just like I get a notification of that text message. Surely I can turn that notification off, as I can for text messages. So I just, it would help me to think through, if we're thinking of those differently, why is that the case?
I think the difference for me would be, we may be sliding into discussion, but that what I'm envisioning is who's getting the notification. That if a staff person is texting my son, who is a minor, am I getting a notification that that communication has happened and it's outside of, or are we notifying people that this is how we will? I mean, I think there's a notification and a transparency issue about how we intend to communicate and what the expectations are. And because texting is fairly new, frequently people want to opt in. And generally it's in my profession, when we work with students, they're opted out until they opt in. We don't just text them, and the issue between adults and minors is one that we think about, and probably are going to think about even more. It's a little different than email, which leaves a record. A text does not leave a permanent record that could be easily gotten to.
Do you have a separate question?
Well, just following up, text messages can leave records. It's what you said is your preferences, but you can permanently keep all your text messages, or you can keep them for certain amounts of time, just like you could delete emails. So I don't see a difference in that regard. And so I'm just asking the question of, I think these methods of communication are raise very similar issues. So just want to put that on the table as we continue this conversation.
Sure. Let me go to Ms. Thompson, and then we'll go to Power Sukowski. We're all just one screenshot away from everything being everywhere all the time.
We are everywhere. I guess my question would be to the policy chair as well as to the superintendent. In light of the emails we've gotten and amendments that board members want to make, and the chair of the policy committee also has trepidations, I'm wondering if we shouldn't pause and send this back to the policy committee and bring it back at the next meeting or the meeting after, unless there's a time sensitivity to this, because there are some questions that come about, and I think that, again, in my opinion, when we start making amendments on the fly here, and there's so many concerns by some board members as well as from the public, that we don't do the work justice. So one, I want to know, is this time sensitive? And two, can we send it back to the policy committee? If so, I'll make an amendment to have it discussed again, because I think that there's so many questions that have arose, or whatever you want to say. So I guess that's my question to the superintendent and chair of policy. Or
There is no imminent reason to have this. Obviously, it's a policy that's been, working its way through for, a year now. So that's but there is no, we would want to be able to include this in handbooks for next year. If there was a parent consent required or something like that, we would need a little bit of time to build that into our back to school packet process, so that people could do that at the same time that they do the picture, sign off and things along those lines. So but it's not a this meeting to next meeting concern. I will say that the policy committee is not scheduled to meet between now and the next meeting, so it would probably push us into June at the earliest.
And to Ms. Davis's point, I think with ours, you're opt-in unless you opt out. So with the school department, I think a lot of our things for the military, et cetera, you're opted in unless you opt out. So you have those forms, to the superintendent's point, that come home, whether it be photography or having access to the kids for the military and colleges, et cetera. So I guess you've raised something for me that I have questions about, and then from some of our staff members, as well as people that work with some of our most vulnerable population, and they have some concerns. So I guess at the appropriate time, I would like to make a motion to send it back to the policy committee to do the work, and then we can even do a date specific, so we make it in time for the packet, if the board entertains that.
I have a question about the policy, and then a question to follow up on Ms. Thompson's comment. So unless anybody, I'm so sorry. Ms. Power Sukowski had her hand up.
I just want to say, from a student's perspective, along with PADS, I go to Casco, and Casco has we have crew, which is like a homeroom, and for as long as I can remember being a student at Casco, I've communicated to my crew teachers through text message, not in a weird way, but we've all made the communication that it's easier to talk to one another and plan things and figure things out through text than via email, because not everyone checks their email, and not everyone, even knows how to log into their email. We've had that problem before. But I just want to say that in my personal experience, it's been a very helpful thing. And my parents are aware that I'm communicating with my teachers via text. I don't know if that revolves around what you guys were talking about at all. But, now I'm 18. Majority of my senior class is, legally adults. So it's just sort of, I guess, depends on the situation, but I've had a good experience in my time.
Mr. Lund. This one's always on.
It's always off?
On. You can talk
You gonna sing for us?
Yeah, just to add on to what Anna said, we communicate with our crew advisors through text and stuff, and I just remembered how we were doing intensive, and we were at Evergreen Cemetery, and we were biking around the cemetery, and the teacher that was in charge of us, right? He was like alone. He was alone with like, I don't know, like close to like 20 students with bikes, and he made everyone take out their phones and like grab his number, and he was like, go bike. And he was like, when we all biked, and like we had to like call him, and he had to call us and text us and tell us like, yo, it's time to come back. And like just like the fact that like he texted me and told me like, yo, it's time to come back, you're gonna be late and stuff, I was like, wow. And like I came back on time, and it was like, it saved us so much. It like bridged like communication gaps, and it made things more easier. And I kind of feel as if like being a teenager myself, it's like in my background, it's like in my type of environment, and I feel comfortable. And I also like it's obvious to know that like you know, like you texting your teacher, like we don't think of teachers as like human beings, so to say. Like we think of teachers as like, yeah, this is the person who gives me homework every day and all that. So like we don't have that like that personal click with teachers and stuff. And and like that's like, and that also like plays into like communication with teachers. The only thing like we do in text is like, you have an assignment due, this is gonna happen, come to school on time and stuff. Even like for conferences, when I was with my mom on the way here and we were running late, my mom is like, yo, text your teacher. And I was just looking at her, I'm like, I'm not gonna do that and stuff. and you know, like, it's just that matter of like, it's sufficient, it's helpful. And I think like, it's just like, people are like afraid that like it's like new technology, like we've been doing emails and stuff and all, but texts are very efficient.
Thank you. Ms. Victor?
I'm not sure if this is appropriate time, but just with respect to delaying this conversation today, it does seem like we actually have time on the agenda today, and the policy committee has a very robust agenda. We're trying to get through a lot, and there is not a lot of time in order to, like, we have a very heavy workload in that committee. We spent a lot of time on this policy already. So, I mean, we've gotten 3 emails from staff, and I'm not sure that it necessitates our pushing back to June this conversation to take into account the 3 emails from staff and the amendment that Mr. Balfons has. So my inclination would be to move forward tonight and have this conversation, and then move on to the other important policy, enable the policy committee to move on to the other weighty work that we need to accomplish.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo.
Yes, I just want some clarification, because it looked like we are a little kind of confused here, because when we followed the workshop last time, we really defined what is supposed to be on the policy. So that means we need to be able to differentiate between the educational purpose in any individual or personal message or emails between the staff and the students. So I think to delay is going to just keep going with the same issues, because the proposal policy is so clear and defined from what we heard. So, and hear from the students is something that is not really getting in consideration, because what they get involved is everything about education. So they got with the teachers with everything related to the education, to the learning process. So this is nothing personal here. And everything is so clear on the proposal policy. So I would like to support to move forward with it.
Thank you. Mr. Balfons.
So my amendments there, I'm not going to propose them to end texting. I'm just trying to make things transparent. And so they come down to basically parental consent, as well as having a district approve texting service, so that we can preserve as a district these text messages. Because when we do, there is a difference between the emails. My understanding is that the emails, they're on portlandschools.org and not to individual phones. And so I think if we have it as the way it is proposed currently, we're not going to have any oversight or monitoring. And if you look at the 2 policies that it's based on, you'll see that in those policies, they weren't as expansive as what's being proposed here. The Jackson policy explicitly, or the Jackson policy prohibits employees from texting students at all. They don't do that. And in our policy, we basically took that, from what I can tell, we took that language and just tweaked it to lumping in the texting along with the phone calls. And that was it. Using this entire texting policy just based upon Jackson's policy. The thing with Jackson is because they prohibited texting, they didn't have any other measures on how to monitor texting. They just left it as you're not allowed to do it. So then I also looked at RSU 21's policy, and that policy prohibits employees from communicating with students using privately owned cell phones unless parents approve. Again, you're getting to parental consent as well as the ability to monitor what's going on. I also looked into the Somerville policy, Somerville, Massachusetts, and they've been working with this text messaging between teachers for a while now, at least since 2014. And so I looked at their policy, and their policy discourages employees from using personal cell phones to text message their students. But they understand that there are going to be times when they need to do that. And so what they do is they allow teachers to do that when it's reasonably necessary. However, the teacher needs to send a copy of the communication to their immediate supervisor. And so that's what I'm looking for, just a little transparency, accountability, monitoring. Otherwise, we just have it saying, here you go. Feel free, text message based upon this, on whatever, school activities. And it's just left at that. There's no teeth, there's no monitoring, there's nothing. What if there is a FOIA request? How are we going to do that? Where are responsibilities for that? And so, to be clear, I'm not trying to prevent texting. I understand that's where students are. Let's go there. But let's go there in a safe place, not only for our students, but our teachers and staff as well. And so I would be in favor of digging into this more. If we don't send the whole policy back, perhaps we take out that particular section on the text messaging. I think the rest of the social media policy is pretty good. And I can see where we borrowed from Jackson and from RSU 21 because they have robust policies on social media. This seems to be kind of like an outlier at what Ms. Davis was saying, and that the text messaging is kind of thrown in there. That may be its own policy, maybe it fits in somewhere else, but I think we could do, if we don't send it all back, just pull that part out, send it back to policy committee, and bring that part back to the full board. I'd be open to that too.
Can I just point out that the reason that we added texting as a separate category was because that was the area where our administrators said they had the most concerns. So when we started down this road of the social media policy, we were thinking about Facebook and things along those lines, and then administrators said you really need to tackle the texting issue, and I think that's why it was added in that way.
And if you look internally at this policy as it is now, there are so many safeguards just to post something on a school-approved social media platform. And then you look at the text messaging policy, it's bare. It does not compare. And I think that at least that portion needs a little more work.
Thank you. Ms. Atkinson?
I guess we've gotten into discussion. I don't know if we want to rein that in at all. But I think if we were to remove the texting section, we would be mute on texting and just be, as open as we are today on texting. I really think it comes down to the monitoring piece, and I can understand discomfort with that, but here in this paragraph, we're saying, sort of to what Joseph was saying, we're prohibiting texting unrelated to homework, classwork, or school activities, right? So it's in that limited context that it's allowed. Now, there's no monitoring for that, so there's no like email. We have the ability to monitor. So I can understand that being a concern, but it's not that we're not addressing it at all, not setting some parameters. So I think this is an improvement over the current state. And I guess similar to Ms. Figdor, I'm ready to move this forward and allow the policy committee to continue on with the remainder of our work for the year.
Ms. Davis?
Do we generally do public comment before discussion?
We should do that, yeah. So like I said, I still
Could I
have a
suggest we do
couple-
that
Yep.
before we?
I still have a couple of questions before we get to that. So if there are no other board questions, I want to just pose mine real quickly. Do I have it? Ms. Victor.
I have a question, but I believe that Google Voice as a option for us providers, it's not a technology that we could use. My understanding from the memo that Mustafa, I believe, created was that Google Voice isn't available now for G Suite. Is that
I'm going to
accurate?
ask Mr. Rastanpour to address those issues, because I know that there was there was a memo that the policy committee reviewed that was largely built around Mr. Rastanpour's answers to board questions during the workshop. That was reviewed by the policy committee at their meeting, and that's where I referenced earlier that they concurred with it. I know subsequent to that Mr. Rastanpour met with Mr. Balfons, and I asked Mr. Rastanpour, and he said that things had not changed as a result of that conversation. So then I did see Mr. Balfons' proposal this morning, and I know that subsequent to that, so when I saw Mr. Balfons' proposal, I shared it with key staff, Mr. Rastanpour, Ms. Olafson, Mrs. Crocker, and ask them to please make sure that they understood, Mrs. Valenzuela, make sure that they understood what was being proposed, and if there were any concerns from staff to bring those forward. So subsequent to that, Mr. Balfons, having gotten feedback from one of our staff who was basically proposing that we should not eliminate texting, but we should use a Google application. He asked me to connect, and I've not had a chance to catch up with Mr. Rastanpour. So Mr. Rastanpour.
Yeah. When it's come to Google, actually, we reviewed the Google capabilities. Google Hangout, it's capable of sending, it was capable of sending messages. Unfortunately, Google pulled that off back in May 22nd, 2017. And unfortunately, Google Hangout, it's not an option at this point. Then it actually brought us to review the Google Voice, which Mr. Balfons actually brought that to our attention. We got online with Google support. Unfortunately, Google Voice, it's available for individual Gmail accounts. But when it comes to organization, it's not available right now for G Suite education accounts. And this is, unfortunately, Google Voice is not right now an option for us. And there is some other applications and some other extension that we can add to Google, which they make actually Google email capable of sending email, but the students and parents and everyone will receive them as a text. And there is some other applications that they are application to application, and all of those needs to be set up by district and district-wide use, that we can actually trace them back and retrieve all the conversation, even if they get deleted. And going back to your question, Ms. Victor, it's the big difference between email and text. It's that area that we have full control on email, and it's traceable and retrievable by IT department, but we don't have any control on text, that it goes to the individual numbers.
An email only if it's coming from the PPS address, but
Yes,
if people
from
are still
PPS
using,
address.
yeah, right.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. No, we're still on questions, and I'm waiting to ask mine.
He's waiting patiently.
That's all right. So my questions were, I'm going to get to them before anybody else jumps in front of me. Just clarifying questions after Ms. Davis' comments about, adults communicating with minors. Clarifying question, because our policy does not state an age limit, if we have a student who's 18 or older, they'll still be covered under this policy. So it's not like at 18, your responsibilities for texting change. Is that correct? So if you're a student in our schools, whether you're 18 or over, these limitations are still going to apply. So the reason I'm asking that or clarifying it is just because we made the comment of adults texting minors, but there might be a couple 18 plus years old. So this applies to even if you're 18, that does not get someone off the hook because they're quote unquote an adult. So I just wanted to ask that clarification. You and I had talked about this briefly. That's right. And then second was on the whether or not we want to consider sending this back to policy. Yeah, I'm getting the sense just from the discussion that the majority of people might not want to send it back to policy, but I'm also getting the sense that some of the questions and big question marks out there are coming from folks that are not part of the policy committee. So I'd hate to send it back to the folks who've been sitting on this reviewing this for some time and not include the people that really do have questions and that are still sort of kind of processing the details of this. So if we do want to take a step back, I recommend just pushing it back on the board's agenda, not sending it back to committee. I'm not sure how the rest of you feel about that. Ms. Davis?
I think I'm the one person on the policy committee who has not weighed in, and I would recommend sending it back to the policy committee. I think it is, there are some issues that I might have understood better as chair had I been at the workshop that was held previously and had heard all of the conversation firsthand. And I'm not in favor of sort of rolling. I could go along with stripping this part out. I think to pass something that's kind of halfway there that we're not really happy with means that it should go back to the policy committee anyway to get worked, but the risk is, well, it's good enough and we won't do it. So I would rather have the policy come back to the policy committee and be worked on either that section of it or the policy in total. So I would not vote for it as currently.
Thank you. Real quick, before I see a couple of hands up, I do want to set real clear that we're still on questions. I want to move over to public comment if we don't have specific questions to clarify on the policy. And then I think a lot of what because we're starting to answer each other's questions, I think that belongs on the discussion piece of our process. So go ahead, Joseph. If you have a question about the policy, shoot it.
Yeah. So does that also include, for example, if a student and a guardian or a parent and the teacher would have a group chat in which they all receive that text? Is that also is that some sort of it's more is it something that could happen? That would
that is permissible under the policy.
Yeah. All right. Axel, go ahead.
So, I want to talk about PAE because in PAE we have old people. I don't know this policy. No. Yeah, old people for the adult one. I want to know this policy will be applied for that guy or just for regular school, because adult is not regular school, but they have a same goal with a regular school. But I want to know if this policy will be applied for the student of PAE.
Yes, it does.
Yep.
It does?
It does in its current form, absolutely. It is intended to cover all Portland Public Schools. It doesn't say Portland Public Schools except for adult education. So again, but the policy as it's currently written is, open to people being able to text. So
Mr. Balkman?
Things related to schoolwork.
Sorry, Mr.
And so that would include students who are relatively young. So if we're saying 10 years old, perhaps, if they have a cell phone. Right? That's the question.
On issues related to homework, classwork, or school activities, such as sporting events and clubs.
With no parental consent.
That's correct.
So if there are no other questions, we'll move on to if there's any public comment on the motion. Come right up to the podium, please.
Thank you.
You might just introduce yourself. We all know you very well, but give us your name and address, and then.
Thank you. My name is Anita St. Ange. I'm the director at Portland Adult Ed. I just want to speak to Portland Adult Ed, that texting in particular is something that right now the research shows that there's a concept called nudging our students, and it's something that we are using more and more often to keep students who might be doing a blended learning experience. So they're working at home on a computer, and the teacher might say, how are things going, that sort of thing. I mean, obviously, we have adults, and so that is a different situation. So I would ask that you think about exempting Portland Adult Ed from a texting. The other piece of that is our teachers don't have access to school district. I mean, all they have are personal cell phones. We don't have any, our teachers don't have laptops or any of that. So it really would be a hardship for us to require some of those extra things. So some of the things that perhaps are appropriate for younger children, but I think with adults, I would like to have you consider exempting us from some of the requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Any other public comment on the motion? Seeing none, we'll bring it back up to the board for discussion. Ms. Thompson?
I think we might as well get it out of the way. So I'm going to make a motion to send the policy back to the policy committee and further the work. And if the superintendent and policy chair can come up with a date so we make the packet, that would be my motion, if there's a second.
Thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Davis? Ms. Thompson, do you want to, I think you did a good job explaining it. You wanted to go back to the policy committee for further review.
And I agree with the superintendent in the sense of making the packet, but again, I'll stand by the fact that there's a lot of questions, and I don't like pushing policies through for the sake of it. And even though we got a few emails, they represent very large populations of students that we work with and the ones that have the silent voice. And so that's my concern. I know that a lot of time has been spent on it, but we spent on the transgender policy, I think, almost a year. And so what these important policies, to my own thought is that it's just not to just get it through and get working and push as many policies through the policy committee. We need good quality policies that are applicable to our whole population, and that we have the best education tools available. I think that Mr. Balfont brings up some good questions, but then our students are saying something totally different. And I think that we've had a big push on listening to our students, and more and more. And I think that they should be further part of the conversation. I mean, we had 3 students here, and 4, I don't know how he feels about it, but I know from having young people myself that they don't do email. That's old people.
Yeah.
And, sorry. But so I guess that's my explanation, and Ms. Morioni seconded it, so take it from there. Thank you.
I really appreciate that, Ms. Thompson. Ms. Davis seconded, yeah. But I know Ms.
Thank you.
She was ready. So Ms. Victor, you have a question on the amendment that we have, not the amendment, but the motion to send it back to policy.
I wanted to discuss it.
Let's get through questions, and then we'll do public comment, and then we'll discuss it as normal process. So if there's any questions on the motion to send this back to policy committee,
Okay,
Ms. Victor, and then we'll go.
I will ask a question. So during the policy committee deliberations, we discussed options for district providing texting services. Mustafa just confirmed that there aren't updates. So is there more work to be done at the committee level for us to consider options that we haven't yet considered? So I mean, what Ms. Thompson's amendment is suggesting that we need to do more work in this area. The amendment is what's new here isn't that texting is a tool that we need that students use, and that is incorporated into the policy. Also, the fact that it's really critical, especially for kids for kids that might be the hardest to reach. That's also incorporated into the policy, and that's the feedback that we got from staff today. What's new is Mr. Balfon's wanting to limit and restrict our ability, the use of text messaging. So we considered these different district providing texting services, and weren't able to come up with anything that was practical. So I'm just wondering, is there additional work to do to consider options that weren't previously on the table with respect to service?
I think the only one is the idea of, I don't think there's another technology solution that's out there that we've not looked at. I think the only, there's the option of requiring parental consent before a student texts with a teacher, or a teacher texts with a student, actually. That's the only new thing that we are looking at today that we have not. And that could be done in committee, or you can have a conversation about it today.
Mr. Balfons?
I think so in the proposed amendment, I did talk about district-provided text servicing. I really intend to suggest district-approved text servicing. That way we can either as a committee or a school board decide that, hey, we can use Google Voice if it becomes available, or when we can use Remind. I know that some people use Remind as well. And so that may be something that the policy committee could explore a little more, is getting deeper into those types of alternatives.
Joseph, I'm sorry.
So just before I ask the question, just to point it out that the texting won't really replace emailing, because that's also important as well. But I have a question. So the motion that we're going to send back to the policy committee, are we sending it back so that they can review ways on which the board can ways that in which that we can monitor the text? Or is it just to send it back for the portion in which it says that teachers are not allowed to text and stuff? So.
Yeah, Ms. Thompson.
I didn't know if you wanted me, I think Ms. Davis wants to add as well. In my opinion, I think that there's still some further review to just go back through the entire policy, look to make sure that we've talked about them, explored them. There's some concerns from people in the community. There's concerns from board members in the policy chair. And so for me, that's why I like us to do really good work, and work that's going to be actionable and something we can follow. And so I just want, in my opinion, I think it's not ready for airtime, and I don't think it's going to hurt anything or any production or anything of that nature, because, again, when we do policy work, I think we should be at our best. Thank you.
And it kind of feels as if it would be important to have a lot of students be at that meeting if it were to be pushed back to the policy, because it's it affects as well as teachers, because we could hear both sides and hear their input on the situation, and instead of just giving it to the policy and then bringing it back to us, and then when we vote on the motion or we pass the motion, and then we have students and teachers in the riot feeling no, we don't we're not comfortable with this thing. So I kind of feel as if I logically think that it would be the best, it would be for the best that we send it back to the policy committee, but at the same time we make sure that there will be teachers and students at that meeting so they can bring valuable input.
And so I would answer that question to you in the sense of we have great, awesome student reps, and I think that you have a good gauge in talking to your fellow peers of what their thoughts are, and showing them the policy, and or having a discussion at your schools, maybe after school, before school, about it, and just getting some feedback. And I think that's really important because, again, you're the center of everything we do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, did you have something else you want to add?
I think just that there's several issues that I don't think we've completely thought through here, and that, we can take the time to do that as a board, but I never feel that we do good wordsmithing and policy work as an entire board in that. And I think there are issues around, in essence, almost beginning to set up a situation where staff are expected to use their personal cell phones and disclose that number to students, and as a condition of their work, which I don't think we really addressed or thought about. And I think we need to provide protections to staff who say, that's not something I'm comfortable doing and I'm not going to do it. We haven't talked about whether we should be providing cell phones in order for folks to do that, which would be a cost. I think that Mr. Balfonte's issue around consent, we haven't costed out or worked through what the issues are around consent, and there were other issues around that were raised around unaccompanied minors, folks who do not have anyone to give consent. Nor have we really addressed, as a committee, do we believe that consent is necessary? That was not a question. It's a bigger question than what we asked. And there are lots of different places to come down, and I'm not saying where I am at this point. But I do think there are more issues we need to discuss before we just move forward. I recognize that many people are very comfortable texting at will, but there also are people who are not. And we need to be mindful of that in the public environment, and that we need to help our staff and our students set appropriate professional boundaries. In my workplace, I don't give out my cell phone willy-nilly, nor do I expect a colleague to text me about something, even if it is work-related, but outside of work hours. So we need to think this through. It's an emerging area. It's a little tricky. I know it's very convenient. I totally get that. But I think it does need a little bit more work. And I think it's probably better to do that at a committee level and with some robust board involvement, perhaps, so that we bring back something that we're not going to try and edit at this point, but that we actually know is ready and solid and we can pass.
Ms. Morioni, I'm sorry, again, before you go, I want to again just clarify. I really want to get through just questions on the motion to send this back to policy, and then kind of move on to the next part. So, Ms. Morioni, if you have a question about the motion, if it's discussion, then let's have public comment about the motion, and then we'll discuss it further, because I feel like we're, again, muddying the water, so to speak. Is that how you say it?
There you go.
All right. So if it could wait, then if there's any public comment on the motion on the floor to send the policy back to the committee, to the policy committee for further review, that'd be a great time to speak. I didn't think so. But I wanted to put it out there. So if there's any further board discussion, Ms. Morioni, I think you had something before I interrupted you.
So I can appreciate Ms. Figdor's concern of it going back again, and I think you're right when we feel like, okay, we've done a lot of hard work in our committees, and we need to have the faith of our committee members to bring something forward that's been worked on. But I do respect Ms. Davis's point. I really do not like breaking it down, editing on the fly. I walk away feeling like I missed something or I didn't have a time to present something. I'm not always very concise myself. So I'm very, very much in favor of bringing it back to the policy committee. And most importantly, Ms. Davis, you just hit on something that I'd been thinking about, and I even just researched a little bit of something here too with regards to research around all of this. And we have two federal policies that we have to make sure we follow, and that's the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act and the Children's Internet Protection Act. So besides all that, and then I was just looking up the details around that quickly, and this is what I mean by on the fly, because I should have done all this in advance for tonight to be prepared, but I'm happy to know it's going to go back to policy, because it also talks about this statement here, which is Ms. Davis's point, which is we are in the business of teaching, right? So around texting and around learning how to get text messages from whomever, that's also part of this, in my mind, of how to make sure our students understand safe texting, safe communicating habits socially, on social media. So with that in mind, I like the idea that potentially we would have, for staff, we'd make it extremely clear-cut for staff to understand what they would need to do to be communicating with a student, for example, and that might mean that they would need to get approval from, let's say, a principal of a school, approval from approval to do that kind of interaction with a student. That's just an idea. So that's one idea. And the other one was with regards to if they are communicating with students by text messaging, like Joseph was explaining with Casco, I could see that's part of Casco's culture, right? That could be part of that could be part of our adult ed culture. This is how they are communicating. This is how they're also learning how to communicate well. So I think that's a critical piece we can't forget, because if we just put the whole kibosh on no texting, we're not going to allow you to do it. Teachers, put away your phones. I think we're missing the next step of we're also trying to incorporate more STEM education. More, we want to be looking more towards the future and be progressive in our thinking, I think, around all of this, because, as you said, Roberto, we're all being monitored right now. We're all on live at the moment. So I think the bigger question remains, how can we ensure that we have the mechanisms to follow up in case there is any infraction of not making sure it's related to education, to classroom work, to those parameters that were already in the policy. That's the biggest concern. If it goes outside of those parameters, that's where we can make sure we have a clear statement that would not be allowed. So with all that said, I'm happy we would go back to policy, so we just take a further look. And also, in particular, when we did hear from the staff members that are the extended learning opportunity coordinators and staff members, those to me are critical engagement opportunities with our students, that if we in any way break that connection, again, with Make It Happen students, that they rely on hearing from their mentor or the adult communicating with them. So those are things I really want us in policy committee. I would love for them to make sure that they're taking a very close look and even inviting those staff members to the meeting, getting a little bit outside of what our, we're just talking to ourselves sometimes at committee meetings. So I think it'd be really great to invite these staff that are having difficulties with this policy. Let's hear from them too. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marnie. Ms. Vigdo?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things. I will be opposing this motion. I think the policy committee has discussed this at 4 separate meetings, all of which have been public noticed, and there's been ample opportunity for people to be involved. And it is responsive to the extended learning opportunities, the comment we got from a staff member from there, as well as from Make It Happen. What those staff are responding to are the amendment from Mr. Balfons to restrict the use of texting. And so that is the new information is his amendment. It isn't work that the committee failed to do. I think it's important to just focus on the fact that we did consider different options for services we could require teachers and staff to use, and found that there wasn't a service that was that was available, frankly. And so we considered that, and as a committee decided that that wasn't an option. So the question left on the table is around consent, and I would encourage us to have that conversation now rather than push this back, because it has been, I believe, again, on 4 different agendas for the policy committee, and we have a very robust agenda to get through as a committee. And I realize this is a last-minute amendment from Mr. Balfons. We're getting some staff who are raising concerns about it. That is very much typical when there's new information added. But our policy is responsive to what the staff are suggesting, which is we need to facilitate communications between students and staff. And teachers. It's very important to have every tool available, especially texting, probably the most powerful one, in order to be in communication with students students and with their families. And I do not support restricting that communication, I would not support restricting that communication because I think it's critical.
Ms. Davis?
One issue that the committee did not address that is occurring to me as we talk about this is that there is an assumption in a lot of the discussion that we're having that all students have and families have access to cell phones. As someone who works with a number of low-income students and families in southern Maine, that is not true. And so this, for me, is beginning to also raise an equity issue, because if we begin to rely on a technology which we are not providing to all students, hence the reason that we have provided computer to all of our high school students, that the computers are provided so that the family and the student has access to email. We are not discussing providing cell phones. And we have students who don't have cell phones. I have students in my program who do not have cell phones. Cell phones also change, and there's a lot of turnover in that, frequently even when folks who are in low-income status, it can be difficult to maintain stable cell phone service. To the extent that we make an assumption or seem to be saying that cell phones is how we are going to communicate with students, then I think as a board we have to address the equity issue, because some of the students in the Make It Happen program in Casco Bay, in our schools, don't have cell phones. And it can become very easy for staff to assume that they've reached everyone when they actually haven't. So I think that's another issue. I'm going to be voting against this because I believe that it does need to come back. We have not fully worked this through. I'm supporting this. Sorry, it's been a long day. But I think we also have an equity issue to address, as well as the other issues raised by Mr. Balfons. And I do believe that consent is an important one. I'm not willing to just walk over that one and say that, I don't believe that we as a board can give consent for our students to be texted without parents who have the legal rights and responsibilities over their children and over those cell phones. They're probably the ones paying the bills to receive texts from teachers just because we want to send them. I think we have to ask if that's something they want, and there has to be active consent. And I would not be in favor of you get it unless you say no, because that's not what we did with even our own alarm notification part. You had to opt into that. This should be an opt-in. If you want to receive these, this is how you do it. And we need to think carefully about what it is we're trying to communicate this way, as effective as it may be with some of our students. There are students that we won't be reaching because they don't have cell phones and their families don't have cell phones.
Mr. Nabanza?
I kind of from a student's perspective, I just want to say that, again, I'll state this again, it's like we're not trying to make texting replace emailing. It's just a tool to make life easier, I guess, or make things more efficient. And I kind of feel as if right now, everybody's thinking as if hey, we're gonna be texting for everything that we're gonna be doing in the schools. Nah, that is just to make things more efficient. And to be honest, that's what we're tasked to do, is to make sure that our students have a great learning experience at our schools. And to be honest, that will make things better and make life easier. And the way I've heard the points, and it's just it's coming across to me, it's as if people are thinking that we're going to be texting for everything. Nah, it's just a tool. It's an additional tool. And I honestly feel as if it's already solved, I guess, because it's pretty simple. It's we have parents give the permission to do so. Like you said, opt in, if the parents want to and stuff. And at the same time, it's it's just going to be there for to make life easier, not mandatory and stuff. So, yeah.
Good. Mr. Norris and then Ms. Powers-Rokowski.
I will just say I think Sarah was interested in my opinion on this, but I'll just say I think it should be sent back to committee only because there's a lot of stuff here, especially in the part about texting, that if we want to have it more regulated, it needs to be thought about a lot more, especially in committee. I mean, texting's just one way that students receive communications from teachers. I can think of at least 5 different platforms on which I communicate with my teachers. Email, Google Classroom, there's the Remind app. There's just regular texting, there's calling, and all those things, it's kind of hard to regulate all of them under one big umbrella of policy. And I think if we want to regulate them more specifically, especially to a point where we can get oversight over them, it needs to be thought about more. Especially also different like ways of communication. I think people were talking about nudging. Those go directly to your phone and they buzz. Some people, their email isn't connected directly to their phone, so that doesn't happen. Or especially even their school emails. I know I'm definitely the minority of people that has their school email logged into their phone. So that's not necessarily the most efficient way to communicate, but I think there are other ways, use specific and case specific ways to communicate that need to be considered.
Appreciate it, Ms. Norris. Ms. Powers-Zukowski.
I also just want to add that not only in school, but also through the school board, I've figured out about a lot of the meetings through text message. So it's not only beneficial in a school environment, but in life in general. So communication through text message, whether it be to question your teachers for academic purposes, because again, going back to crew, we bond with not only our classmates through text, but when our teacher's involved, we have a better way to rely on our teachers for other things. So, and then again, even in the school board, I gain a lot of the knowledge as to what we're doing through text message. So I just wanted to point that out.
Are you sure of that? Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Mr. Atkinson has his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Atkinson.
Sorry, I just want to say I'm fine with this going back to committee and us looking it over again. I do think that we went through this very diligently over the course of 4 or so meetings. This is just, and Ms. Bondo mentioned something around this earlier. This is just a tricky issue. It's going to be difficult, whether we talk about it now or whether we dig into it a month and a half from now. There are tricky issues that we're all going to want to get involved with. So if this does come back to the committee, I think it was suggested that we include some students and some teachers in that conversation, and I would love to see more of the board at that conversation as well. If we're all, really interested in the details of this, let's dig into the details and hash it out, because, we had a lot of talk at the committee level about, okay, texting is a fact of life. It's the way that this communication is happening for students. We really don't want to get in the way of that. Yeah. What we want to do is put some very clear parameters, very clear guidelines around that, so that we are being very explicit about what is an appropriate type of communication between a staff member, a teacher, and a student. So I think it's fine to revisit it, but I hope that we will all get engaged with that and dig into the details, because it's a tricky and evolving situation. This policy is probably one that's going to come up again in a couple of years when we're looking at a whole different set of technologies, and texting isn't a thing anymore.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. If there's no other comments, I'll chime in real quick. My preference was I speaking really loud, huh? I heard my own echo. My preference would be to not send it back to the committee, but maybe just delay it to the next board meeting. I feel like a lot of the questions that were asked, because it seems like texting inside of this policy is not what's in question, but rather the proposal of how do we monitor texting and whether or not we require some sort of agreement ahead of time, consent for texting. And I feel like that maybe does not have to happen, that discussion does not have to happen at the policy committee. I won't say what I said at the workshop last time, because these issues are not going to be able, we're not going to be able to monitor as they happen live, like as things are being communicated. It is something that we would expect someone to report an issue and then we investigate it. We are at that's the way that this policy would work. If somebody sort of kind of raises a flag and says, hey, I think this is not appropriate, and then we have to look into it. So it's hard to have policy that, you know, quote unquote, criminalizes people before they've done anything wrong, and I'd be really uncomfortable doing that. My biggest interest in this issue is how do we communicate, how do we prepare our students to recognize those red flags? How can we instruct our students to know what is appropriate communication from an adult in the schools and what is not appropriate? Because that could be, like I said last time, it could really start as something really subtle that we don't recognize, and then when it does become inappropriate, have we reported it in time? Have those text messages been deleted? So again, how we prepare our students, how we instruct our students in identifying inappropriate communication. I think that that's the key to making something like this work, because any wording or any way that we go about this policy is not going to prevent anything from happening. We're still going to be depending on someone to report it. So having said that, I'm going to put the motion to a vote. We're voting whether we're going to send this back to the policy committee. So all those in favor of the motion on the floor to send this policy back to the committee for further review, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So, and all those opposed? 1. So that's 7-1 vote. The motion passes. It'll go back to policy. You think so? Does it go back to the main motions? Okay, so then how can you walk me through that one? Because that'd be a little bit.
Well, now you say now we're going to go back to the main motion, and then we do a vote.
But what is?
As amended.
As amended, okay. So then we're back to the main motion. So it's the motion has been amended to, instead of consideration and action, to approve, consideration and action to send the policy GBEEA, use of social media by school staff, back to the policy committee for further review. Okay, are we correct in this, Ms. Davis? I'll lean on you. Yes. All right. So that's the motion that's already on the floor and it's been seconded. So do we have to go through questions and comments again? Technically. Okay. So is there any board questions? Ms. Vigdor?
I'm wondering if there's a way, since we held a workshop on this, if there's a way to bring these questions to the fore earlier so that we could better use our time as a board. If we can anticipate some of the issues that are being raised by the board, then I think that we'll be more effective in our use of time. So I just encourage us, I don't know if there's a clear answer to the process question, but it does seem like this wasn't our best use of time.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? If there's no other questions, we'll go. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, back to the board. Any board discussion? Seeing none, I'll add that I agree with Ms. Figdor. If we can be if we communicate as openly as possible about the questions and concerns that we have, we're not going to debate anything over email, but rather just send in those questions, things that you expect the policy committee to go through quickly and briefly. That way it could be included, and they're not just literally redoing the work that they did, but rather tackling the new questions and concerns that have come up. Ms. Davis?
I would agree. That would be very helpful to our work, and I think that this policy may have suffered in our sort of a little bit of our rush to get it to you. that it came as a first read with a workshop following, as opposed to having a workshop before and then a first read, which for many years was our traditional way of approaching our business, is that there was a workshop to discuss an issue where oftentimes we decided if it would be dealt with by the whole board or if it would go to committee and what its path through the board should be. But we seem to have slipped into lately a reversal of that procedure, which is tripping us up in several instances now. And so I might suggest that the superintendent and the chair think about that, because that allows this to surface without having an actionable item on the floor, and to surface those questions and determine where it should go and how it should proceed through the board. This was highly effective when we did it before. In fact, that was our standard operating procedure for many years.
I'll just say that the process that we've had of workshops on first read is something that we have been doing over the last couple of years, and I think that in other areas we have found that to be really helpful. I think that when we talk about, specifically over the last few weeks, when we talked about the budget process and how easy it was for us to understand the information, is precisely because we were doing a lot of workshops around first read of some of the things that were eventually part of the budget. So it could be real beneficial if done correctly, and then I kind of understand what you're saying, that in this case it didn't seem that way. I'd hate also to put to say that this was rushed. I think that I do want to, respect the work of the committee and appreciate it, because there was several meetings that they dug into this, and I know that superintendent has been working on this policy for some time, and that he's devoted a lot of his time and effort into it as well. I do think, though, that some of the questions and some of the things that came up over the last few days are worthy of further discussion, which is why I was okay with it, being pushed away or being pushed back from today. And if the board felt that policy is the right place to do that, then so be it. Again, so maybe if we can, and maybe I'll communicate this via email, if we can set a timeline of when those questions and concerns should be sent in. I think we're always going to get emails and responses from folks, specifically staff, and we can't just have that constantly be a tripping up kind of moment, because then we'll never get anything done. So again, having said that, we're back to the main motion. We're going to vote. Seem redundant to me, but we're going to do it. All those in favor of sending the policy GBEEA, use of social media by school staff, back to the policy committee for further review, please indicate. All those opposed? Thank you. 7-1, with the students voting with a majority. Redundant. All right, thank you so much for that, guys. It's only 9 o'clock. All right, new business. There is no comments on new business. The first read of the resolution for naming an elementary school for Gerald Talbot. That is so wrong. We were scheduled to have a workshop at the end of tonight's meeting. If it's okay with everybody, we'll move that to now as part of the read, just so that, because we do have the Talbot family here in the audience, and I don't want to make them wait any further. So if the superintendent is ready to move us to the workshop.
I think it takes consent from the board.
But I wanted to see if you were ready. Okay, perfect.
We're ready to go.
Ready to go. So, Ms. Thompson.
There is no public comment on the workshop, so I'm wondering, there's only 2 items to finish the agenda, and then we can go into workshop, and it's not a time when there's something on the agenda, first read, we don't converse on that item. And so I'm very appreciative of them sitting through this. Thank you very much. But I think we just have a couple items left that are going to be
So you guys want to just push through and then move? Okay, that's fine with me. That's good.
Thank you.
All right, so then we'll move on to personnel. Consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed. Election of probationary teachers effective August 26th. It's not 2029. This is not 2029. It's August 26th.
No, that would probably be a typo.
So it's 2020. Doesn't anything. August 26th, 2019. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, second by Ms. Morioni. Will the superintendent please speak to the motion?
I'll ask Ms. Stoddard to please speak to it. I don't have that information in my packet.
Good evening. So we're bringing forward 1 probationary teacher for the new school year. This is the new addition at Paths. This is funded by the state. the money is in place, and so the person is interested in having an approval from the board before a resignation occurs for him. So that's why we are bringing this forward a little bit in advance of when we normally would otherwise.
Thank you. Any questions from the board on the motion? Ms. Davis?
I just wanted to make sure and sort of restate it very clearly that this is not dependent on the budget that is still up in the air, that the funding is assured from the state. So whatever happens with our budget, which is currently at the city council, that would not impact this position.
Yes, that is correct. And our plan is actually to not have the superintendent sign the contract until after the budget passes, but we're doing this as reassurance for him that the position is approved. So we're holding it till June as we normally would with all of our others. We're just moving this forward. It is approved at the state.
But Ms. Davis, the money is in the EPS
Yep,
projections
it's in the EPS.
that we received. So, obviously those are also not done until the state budget is complete. But we have reasonable assurance, and this is an important position that we do not want to lose a candidate for.
No, I can understand. I just wanted to be clear for the public because it's not our typical and possibly also, hopefully the candidate is assessing the risks because it does sound like there are still some, if we're not signing a commitment letter and so on, at some point they've got to resign. And if we haven't signed, I mean, we've passed it, but is there a reason that we wouldn't actually make the offer at this point if we were passing it at the board level?
The offer's been made.
Okay.
So this is, and the person has accepted, but the next step in that is actually board approval.
The board approval.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, there's no public comment on personnel items, so any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the personnel items, election of probationary teachers effective August 26, 2019, please indicate. Unanimous with the students voting in favor. Thank you. And given that it's before the hour of 10 p.m., is there any public comment on items not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Ms. Davis, second by Ms. Morioni. All those in favor, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. We have adjourned.